Welcome to this video on visualizing political polarization. Research shows that a large part of the Dutch population has the perception that polarization is increasing. But when analyzing the data of the Dutch National Election Survey over the period of the last 20 years on several political issues like European unification, asylum seekers, and income difference, no clear pattern of issue polarization appears. However, this is not the full story. There are other ways of defining and analyzing polarization. One form is called ideological polarization, which can be studied by looking into how political issues are aligned. Moreover, a third approach is to study polarization by looking into how issue alignment results into segregated social groups, a process which is called partisan sorting. To scrutinize whether polarization is actually increasing, measuring issue polarization is relatively straightforward as the distribution of responses to political issues can be compared across years. However, performing a similar analysis for issue alignment and partisan sorting is not possible as these concepts require analyzing the interconnection between political issues. Luckily, in this video we will provide a solution as we will visualize issue asymmetry and partisan using the new method called response item networks. After watching this video, you will be able to explain the difference between the different forms of polarization, understand what response item networks are and how they are constructed based on election survey data. Moreover, you will know how to use response item networks to study issue alignment and partisan sorting. Lastly, we will introduce an app where you can using response item networks to analyze the Dutch election data yourself. Let's begin. The first form of polarization we discuss is issue polarization, which is defined as a process in which over time, voters adopt more extreme position regarding one single issue. To give an example, we consider a population that we ask their opinion regarding climate mitigation. People can pick between stop mitigation, neutral, stronger mitigation. Initially, people mostly pick the neutral position. Over time, however, people pick the extreme positions. This process is what we call issue polarization. Moving on, the second form of polarization we will discuss is issue alignment, where voters' responses are increasingly start to align on multiple issues. To exemplify issue alignment, we continue where we stopped previously. To remember voters' response, they get colored shirt representing their opinion regarding climate mitigation. Next, they are asked their opinion regarding a different issue. In this case, income distribution. They again have three options to choose from. People again pick a response, and this time they receive a trousers to represent their choice. Lastly, people are asked their opinion regarding a third issue. Within this example, they get this time to pick their opinion regarding the livestock and its environmental impact. People again get to choose three different options: yes, neutral, or no. People pick their response, and based on their response, they receive a nice colored hat that resembles their choice regarding the specific issue. Now, when looking at the outfits of the people, it is clearly visible that none of them have the same outfit, meaning that in this case there is no issue alignment. However, when the situation changes, and people start holding similar responses across different issues, issues start to align. This process towards aligned issue responses is the second form of polarization. The third and last form of polarization that we will discuss is partisan sorting. Partisan sorting consists of two parts. The first part is that people sort themselves into social groups that have similar view regarding a variety of issues. The second part of partisan sorting is that people start adopting issue positions similarly to the partisan group they identify themselves with. This causes that the homogeneity regarding political views within partisan groups tend to decrease. These two processes of people increasingly sorting themselves into partisan groups and adapting views based on the partisan group is what is defined as partisan sorting. Wrapping up, polarization is thus a process in which issue responses get more extreme, issues start to align, and partisan group more homogeneous. To analyze these thematic and temporal dynamics of polarization, we use the method called response item networks. We now will explain how response item networks are constructed. At first, it is important to understand that nodes represent the responses to issue questions. So if we again take the example situation in which we ask the people to provide their opinion regarding each of the three different issues by selecting three of the possible responses. Within this example, there are three issues with 3 response nodes per issue, which sums up to a total of 9 response nodes. After creating the response nodes, the next step is to build the response network. Two response nodes are connected whenever both responses are held by the same people within the population. To exemplify this idea of correlating responses, we will continue with our example population. When looking at the uptake of the light pink response node, you can see that all people who hold this response node wear a red head, as they are in favor of climate mitigation policies. Therefore, a connection is made between the light pink and the red response node. Because there are too little combinations of light pink with orange or yellow response, no connection is made between these responses. The responses of people are much more scattered. Most people who are against income redistribution wear a dark blue trousers, which means they are pro-livestock reduction. Therefore, a connection between the light pink and the dark blue response is made. A smaller subgroup thinks different, however, and do not support livestock reduction policies. Therefore, a connection is made between the light pink and light blue response nodes. This process is repeated for all the other response nodes in the network. Response nodes are only connected in the case that they are positively correlated. In other words, if responses to different issues are often held by the same people within the population, the response nodes get connected. Moving on, the third and last step is the relocate response within the network based on the strength of the connection. So within the example we discussed before, we will look into the positioning of light pink response node representing the position of being against income redistribution. As you can see, everyone who holds this response also is in favor of stronger climate mitigation measures. This means that the correlation between these two response nodes is very high. The situation on the issue of livestock reduction is more nuanced. As mentioned before, the people who are against income redistribution do not all think the same about the livestock reduction policies. The majority of this group is in favor of livestock reduction policies, while a smaller minority is not in favor of such policies. This means that the correlation between the pink node and the dark blue node is smaller than the correlation between the pink and red node, but bigger than the correlation between the pink and light blue node. Now we are aware of the strength of the connections, we can start moving them around using the Fruchterman-Reingold force algorithm. Because the correlation with the red node is the highest, the pink node that represents being in favor of income redistribution moves more closely towards the red node than the blue nodes. As the correlation with the dark blue node is bigger than with the light blue node, the pink node is pulled more towards the position of the dark blue node rather than the light blue node. When applying this force algorithm to all the nodes in the network gets restructured and highly correlating responses will be located closely to one another within the network. Now you understand how response networks are created. The next step is to get an idea of what these networks can tell you about polarization. When looking into position of the nodes in the network, which responses are highly correlated and therefore selected by the same people, and maybe more importantly, which responses do not have a connection. The second aspect to look into is whether you can identify response clusters. This showcases that a selective group of people within the population think very similar regarding a variety of issues. That is interesting to look at is which response node forms a bridge between the response clusters. The bridging responses shows you which response unites people from different ideological clusters. Let's move on to the last part of this explanation video and let's analyze the Dutch election data for issue alignment and partisan sorting. Issue alignment can be identified within response item networks by looking into how the strength of the correlations between response nodes and the grouping of response nodes within network. There is low issue asymmetry when the connections are thin and the neutral and extreme responses are scattered across the network. On the other hand, in the case of high issue alignment, the thickness of the connections increases and the response nodes are located in a way that the extreme positions regarding an issue are on the left and right side of the network, with only the neutral white responses forming a connecting bridge. Now let's look at the data. When generating the response item network with the issues of income redistribution, European unification, asylum seekers, and euthanasia for the Dutch election of 2023, no issue alignment is visible as the strength of connections are low and the issue positions are not clearly structured. However, when swapping the issue of income redistribution and euthanasia with the issues of livestock reduction and climate policies, a completely picture appears. The data shows very strong issue alignment with the responses of pro-climate policy, pro-European unification, pro-livestock reduction and allow more asylum seekers grouped on the right and all opposing responses group on the left. Let's now look into partisan sorting. Partisan sorting, on the other hand, can be identified in a different manner. A good example within the Dutch case is to look into how people the same educational background start to align their issue responses. In this case, if a response node colors dark blue, it means that almost every voter that have picked that particular response has a practical educational background. When grouped response nodes do not have the same color and the colors are not to dark red or blue, no partisan sorting exists. When colors get more dark and the response clusters start to have the same color, partisan sorting is increasing. When looking again at the Dutch election data of 2023, we see again that partisan sorting is highly sensitive to the issues selected. When selecting the issue of income redistribution, nuclear energy, LGBTQ rights, and euthanasia, there is no clear sign of partisan sorting as colors remain relatively neutral and the most read responses aren't grouped. Surprisingly, within the same election year, selecting the issues of livestock reduction, European unification, asylum seekers, and climate policies shows a completely different pattern. This time, there is clear case of partisan sorting. The different response clusters are clearly divided in a red and blue response clusters. This reflects the segregation we discussed before between these two population groups. Wrapping up, we hope that this video helped you to better understand the different forms of polarization and how you can analyze them using response item networks. What will follow now is a short introduction into how you can start analyze polarization in the Netherlands yourself. We built an online application where you create response networks yourself based on all the data of the Dutch elections between 1998 and 2023. Try it out now. In the top left corner, you can select the issues. Hovering across them shows you an explanation of each issue. Be aware that the earlier years do not include all the issues that are in the most recent years. Next, when hovering with your cursor on the response nodes, additional information appears like the issue question and the point scale. The number on the response nodes indicates the position on the response node on the point scale. The hover information is adjusted when activating the show label on the right side of the screen. Now the distribution of responses to the issue appears. The orange bar indicates the position of the hovered response node. Moving on, activating the show node size scales the nodes based on how popular they are relatively to the other responses to the issue. For example, the node EU4 is very large as it is the most picked response for the issue of European unification. In the second menu, different coloring labels can be selected. As discussed before, when selecting the educational level, nodes are colored based on the average educational level of the voters picking a response node. This can help to identify partisan sorting. When selecting a response node in the network, it will highlight the response nodes the selected response is connected to. Clicking next to network resets the selection. Lastly, when moving downwards on the page, you can compare the response item networks on the selected political issues for the other election years down to 1998. This is the end of the video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below.